Welcome to Agonal Dreams podcast bonus episode number 2. This story is a prelude to the events of episode 1 of the main storyline. Please check the show notes before listening to this episode for trigger warnings. Join us as we get a glimpse from the perspective of Julia Hernandez, Adrian's terminally ill ex-fiancée.
I quickly tapped the red decline button on my cell before shutting it off completely and stuffing it under the couch cushion.
Stop harassing me.
The past few months had gotten progressively worse. After the initial shock of my diagnosis, I was taken from hospital to hospital, spent hours locked inside whirling MRI machines, underwent critical mental evaluations while being scanned and poked in every imaginable way. I looked down at the vein in the crook of my right arm and slightly felt it with my index finger. It bulged under my touch. My arm was bruised and patched with yellows and greens. I tried to stand, but a bolt of electric pain zipped up the middle of my spine. Eventually, I told them no more samples of my blood, no more spinal fluid, no more prodding into my psyche. I stood in front of the floor-length mirror in the hallway, staring at myself, looking for any traces that I was dying. Except for a few dark rings around my eyes and the bruises on my arm, I still looked like me. I faked a smile, watching my face for any outward signs of sickness. Stuck out my tongue and saw a healthy pink. I ran a hand through my dirty hair, oily from neglect and bouts of depression. The chestnut locks were still full, shiny, luminous. Nobody could see the pain from the outside. The sudden burst of agitation ripped through my brain like a forest fire. Ugh! I continued to stare at my reflection, the remaining broken shards now truly reflecting what a monster I had become. The young doctor smiled at me as he listened to my mother gush her worries to him through tears and guilt. My hand, now bandaged and numb, lay limply across my knee. I smiled back at him instinctively, unreactive to my mother's demands for me to be committed. The doctor shook his head and flipped through my chart while also placing his hand on my shoulder.
I understand your concern, Mrs. Hernandez, but the fact of the matter is your daughter is a legal adult. She does not meet the guidelines for an involuntary hold.
I watched his lips move and said nothing.
Doctor, you don't understand. My daughter is very sick. I'm her mother. I know her. She's not herself anymore, and I'm worried something is going to happen to her. Something worse than smashing her hand into a damn mirror.
The young doctor looked at me, urging me with his eyes to defend myself. But I could only shrug. My mother's concerns were valid, but I did not want to be controlled. I was tired of useless medical intervention.
Ay, Dios mío.
I wanted more than anything to leave the hospital and go home. Still, my mother's incessant demands eventually attracted the attending physician of the floor, flanked by 2 rough-looking security men, donned in black jackets. The young doctor shook his head at me in disappointment before handing my chart off to his boss and politely excusing himself from the exam room. I watched his every movement and locked eyes with him before he softly closed the door behind him. My mother and the older doctor discussed my medical history in full detail, much to my absolute embarrassment. The 2 security guards were shooed outside and instructed to wait in the hallway. The attending physician was able to squelch my mother's shrieking demands by referring me to the Huntington's Disease Center at the University Hospital. He also referred me to a genetic counselor, a psychiatrist, and social services. I rolled my eyes as he supplied my mother with numerous pamphlets and reading material for family members affected by the disease. Eventually, the doctor ran out of resources and spiel, then encouraged my mother to take me home, as I was now being discharged immediately. She reluctantly agreed.
I would feel a lot better if you came and stayed with me and Papi for a while.
You know I'm not gonna do that, Mom.
I'm so worried about you, Julia. I can't sleep at night.
I'm fine, Mom.
Fine? Huh. You weren't fine this afternoon when I found you covered in blood in your apartment.
You can't just keep bursting into my place anymore. It was an accident.
What am I supposed to do when you don't answer your phone?
I told you it was off.
Come on, Julia, I'm not stupid. I had been calling you all morning. Why didn't you answer? Wait a minute. You aren't supposed to turn your phone off when you have class.
I called in today.
My mother sighed and squeezed the steering wheel in frustration. Her lips formed a silent prayer, and she stared at the road ahead of us. She didn't speak to me until she parked in front of my apartment building.
I don't need you to come upstairs.
Who's going to clean up the glass?
Adrian will be home any minute now.
Yeah, perfect. Make sure you turn on that phone, Julia. I'm serious.
Never mind. She just walked in.
He stared at me silently. He was cradling his cell to his ear with one hand, while picking up the pieces of broken glass on the floor with his other. A deep red splotch of my blood was puddled in front of the mirror. His face was pulled tight into a grimace, the skin around his eyes red and weary-looking. For a moment, my heart burst into my throat. Seeing him look so worried, I wanted to run to him and hold him tightly in my arms. But the feeling faded, and soon was replaced with my usual irritation, and I stared back at him with an equally sad face. He looked down at my bandaged hand, and I could have sworn I saw his lip tremble slightly, but it vanished as soon as I saw it. I folded my arms immaturely. What? His face had betrayal written all over it.
Mind explaining what happened here?
I shrugged carelessly. He sighed and continued cleaning up the glass. I walked past him and fell into the sofa with no explanation. My phone popped out from under the cushion when I sat down, causing it to drop noisily to the hardwood. Adrian cocked his head to the side when he heard my phone drop, and stuck his head into the living room as I quickly tried to kick it under the couch.
Julia, please. I'm your fiancé. I should be your point of contact when things happen.
He gestured to the broken mirror in my hand. I don't see the big deal. I had an accident and went to get it checked out.
Who took you, your mother?
No, Frankie did. I lied effortlessly, watching his face drop.
Why the hell did you call Frankie before you called me?
I smiled and shrugged again. He was already on his way over here anyway. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched Adrian's mouth tighten into a thin frown as he wordlessly tossed all the rest of the broken glass into the bin. His eyes avoided mine as he proceeded to get the mop and clean up the blood splatter. My hand started to ache, and on impulse, I began undoing the bandages. I felt his strong hand wrapped around my fingers, lovingly, despite how cruel I'd been to him. He kissed my engagement ring, and I felt sopping wet tears escape from the corners of my eyes. God damn it, Adrian. Why do you always do this?
Do what?
He leaned in closer to me, and I couldn't help but collapse against his body. My tears began to flow even faster as he ran a hand through my hair, not caring how dirty it was or how badly I smelled.
I know you want me to give up on you, but I told you I never will.
His kisses across my forehead were tender, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't reignite my anger towards him. That night we stayed up talking, reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. I eventually confessed that my ex-boyfriend hadn't taken me to the hospital. It had been, in fact, my mother, like he had already suspected. He laughed when I told him this, also confessing he too had received a text from my mother explaining what happened to me. Despite her not being fond of Adrian, she still had the common courtesy to let him know about my whereabouts because she knew I hadn't done so myself. I told him that my emotions were getting harder to control, and I didn't want to keep hurting him. We both knew it was related to my disease progression, but I knew it still wounded him nonetheless. We were still talking when my phone pinged. An email had been received. I opened it quickly, discovering the school where I had been a second-grade teacher for the last 3 years was letting me go. How could they do this to me?
This says you've called out 17 times this semester alone with no doctor's notes. Julia, you haven't been logging on for your classes?
My face reddened in embarrassment, and my hand ached inside the bandage as I clenched it repeatedly with utter fury. I'm sick. They can't terminate me for being sick.
Calm down. We'll figure this out.
Easy for you to say. My job is the only thing I have left about the old me. Now that's gone too. What am I supposed to do now? Adrian tried to calm me, but I lashed out angrily, pushing him away before storming into the bathroom. Just go away!
Julia.
My head pounded with anger, disappointment, and dread. I waited several minutes for Adrian to go away before shutting off the faucet. A few slow drops continued to fall from the faucet opening, and I watched them with disinterest. My hand started aching, and I clenched it again, out of habit. And I stared at the raw, angry red skin, a row of narrow sutures embedded into the crest of my knuckles. Great. Another thing that needs to be fixed in this place. I stood up, rising slowly from the lowered toilet seat, bracing for a stitch of pain, but felt nothing. The water dripped again, and I instinctively slapped the faucet with my uninjured hand, as if a sudden jolt would prevent any further droplets from escaping. I stared at the sink faucet, narrowing my eyes, daring it to attempt further insurrection while I was sequestered inside the bathroom. That's what I thought. I said this aloud, and chuckled to myself, mentally patting myself on the back for having control over at least one thing in my life. Hello? For some reason, my heart began to race inside my chest, and I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. I had experienced hallucinations in the past, but they had never made me feel afraid. Nothing stirred inside the tiny bathroom, but my anxiety skyrocketed. I racked my brain trying to remember if Adrian had said when he would be back. Still, deep down, I knew that his words had been muffled outside the locked door and ignored amidst the running faucet water. In utter horror, I watched, terrified, as blubbery wetness cascaded from the faucet, puddling and clogging the sink with inky chunks. It wasn't water anymore that spurted out of the opening. My feet were absolutely frozen as the blackness situated itself within the sink bowl, unfurling what appeared to be tentacles in a wriggling mass of chaotic blackness. I tried to scream, but no sound emitted from my throat. It must be a hallucination. I tried to reason with my own brain, but the longer I watched the creature squirm, the less and less I was sure of anything. Despite it not having any discernible head or face, the creature turned itself inside the sink bowl, edging ever so slightly closer to me, rising its tentacle-like appendages up and over the rim of the sink. A chill ran down my spine as the tentacle touched my bare skin. There was no pain, only numbing wetness that began to spread to the rest of my body like an anesthetic. The creature's tentacles began to spread itself all over my skin, coating it like external slime. I still couldn't move, but the sensation wasn't so unpleasant as it was alien, unlike anything I had ever felt before. It made its way toward my mouth, and that's the moment I squeezed my lips shut in defiance. This creature then advanced towards my open nostrils, but I cupped my injured hand around them, not allowing the slime to enter my body. It stopped vibrating when I blocked my nose, and for an instant, I was worried that it was going to physically hurt me. Instead, the slime simply slithered over my closed hand covering my nose, slowly coating my fingers, unfurling its tiny tentacles around the swollen hump of my knuckle. The wisp of slight manipulation, the slime sucked itself under my skin along the row of black stitching. I watched with macabre fascination as the black slime that was already covering most of my body by now retracted and minimized itself until all of it was completely sucked into my hand. As the last of the slime entered my body, one by one, the stitches popped out, leaving nothing but completely closed skin. I ran my fingers along where my injury had been, feeling no pain, no remnants of any injury that had ever transpired there at all. By now, I rubbed my eyes again, fully convinced I had just had an intense hallucination. The room was dark. The covers are pulled up to my chest. Adrian is sleeping peacefully next to me. Suddenly I laughed to myself, fully convinced I had gone mad. Nothing but a ridiculous dream. Adrian snored next to me, his arms tucked protectively under his pillow. He lay on his stomach, and I watched his torso rise and fall in deep waves as he slept. As I reached out to stroke his back, I noticed my injured hand and pulled it backward reflexively as I gazed at the lack of stitches. Thinking I may have hurt my other hand, I pulled it out from under the covers, staring at the naked backs of both my hands in awe. Neither had any blemish, laceration, or row of stitches at all.
All right, class, 1, 2, 3.
Keep your eyes on me.
Very good, children. Now, we'll revisit the multiplication tables when we return on Monday.
I smile as I watch my students pack up and exit the classroom. Friday afternoons can be trying, especially when most of your students' heads are already on the weekend.
Goodbye, Ruby.
Bye, Angel.
Have a nice weekend, Austin.
One by one, my students file out of the classroom. They are still so young, so full of energy and innocence. Despite it being the end of the teaching day, I remain seated at my desk. A stack of papers needs to be graded, and my classroom needs a good wipe down. It's Friday afternoon, but I do not have anywhere else to be.
Oh, hello there. I'm sorry, I didn't see you at first.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to disturb you. I'm just looking to pick up my sister.
I prop the broom against the wall and wipe my hands on my blouse.
I'm sorry, did you say sister? Are you sure you don't mean to go to the high school across the street? This is elementary.
No, I meant what I said.
He smiled at me, and I could tell it was genuine.
I think she's in your class. Miss Hernandez is second grade, right? Melanie Berlanga?
Oh, yes. Melanie is my student.
I checked my wristwatch.
But, you are about 45 minutes late. Class is over.
Oh, great.
But Melanie stays in after-school care most days, so you're in luck. I'll show you where the lunchroom is.
Thank you so much, Miss Hernandez.
Right in here.
Thanks again, Miss Hernandez.
I lay on my back, willing myself to get up, but my brain ignores me. I can see everything, but yet it feels like I'm participating in a virtual reality program of my own life. Get up, damn it. With all my might, I force my muscles to work, to do something, but I simply cannot move a muscle. A cold flush of fear pours over me, and I wonder if my disease has somehow progressed overnight. Adrian sits up and stretches, yawning loudly before sauntering off to the bathroom. I'm left alone, locked inside my own body. Then suddenly my legs throw themselves over the side of the bed and I roll awkwardly, childlike, onto the floor.
Everything all right out there?
Yes. What the hell? How the hell did I answer him? It wasn't me. It was something inside me. My body picked itself off the ground, again without me in control whatsoever. I was merely spectating from behind my own eyes. I desperately tried to gain control back, but my limbs ignored me. The slime. Did that really happen? I demanded my feet to walk to the living room so I could see the mirror, and at first, my legs stood stiffly, but thankfully, I was able to direct my feet to move out of the bedroom. At the sound of water, my feet stopped abruptly. A cold chill ran down my spine. I could feel the tentacles bristling inside me, excitedly vibrating. My feet led me to the bathroom door, while my arm pushed it open slightly. Stop! 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 I desperately try to scream to get Adrian's attention, but his back is to me. My hand reaches for the razor on the bathroom counter, my fingers gripping it as if my life depended on it. I try to resist, but the unseen force is too strong.
Oh, hey. Sorry, did my alarm wake you up again?
He smiles and ignores my haggard stare. The razor is poised at my side, my fingers clenched around it so hard they begin to throb.
I was thinking that after a day like yesterday, you could use some cheering up. How about we have a date night tonight? I'll bring home some steaks, cook a nice meal for us, and we'll watch a movie. How's that sound?
I can't answer him, but I can feel the slime pushing inside my body. I know it wants to hurt him, kill him even. So I was utterly shocked when I felt my head awkwardly nod after a few moments. Adrian smiled and kissed me on the head before going back into our bedroom and getting dressed for work. Hours passed and my body sat rigidly perched on the edge of the couch. I was so hungry and my head ached from thirst, but I couldn't move. I was still wearing my clothes from the day before. I tried to cry, but only a single tear escaped my eye before my body refused to release any more. Eventually, my clothes became drenched in urine, but still, I sat, still holding the razor. My head turned at the noise, and before I knew it, my feet were shuffling across the hardwood. I'm humiliated to be answering the door covered in my own piss. Still, the escape from sitting in the same position without moving for 4 hours at a time gives me such relief I almost didn't care about how I looked or smelled.
Hey, you.
I rolled my eyes to see Frankie in my doorway. A dozen red roses are aggressively pushed into my hands. I desperately want to tell him to fuck off. but I already know the slime inside me would not allow it. He grins and pushes past me into my apartment, ignoring my body odor and sopping wet shorts. My hand softly closes the door behind him, while also tossing the bouquet of roses into the hallway.
Nice to see you in a better mood today. I was starting to think you were tired of me.
I grit my teeth inside my closed mouth. Frankie was one bad mistake I couldn't seem to shake. Why, today of all days, did he have to try to worm himself back into my life? I felt myself begin to sweat as he eyed me up and down.
You gotta do something with all that.
He crudely gestured to my soiled clothes before cracking a misogynistic smile.
I'll wait.
I stood there, frozen in rage. If I had control over my body, I would have slapped him while he was still in the hallway. Instead, my head gave another awkward nod before ambling off into the bathroom. I tried to scream in protest, but the slime ignored me. Instead of peeling off my clothes, my feet softly walked back into the bedroom, sliding open the closet door and stepping inside. I watched the bathroom from here, waiting. In less than 5 minutes, I heard Frankie walking to the back of the apartment. He was already naked when he made it to the bathroom, rubbing his hands together in anticipation as he tiptoed towards the closed shower curtain. With inhumane speed and dexterity, my body emerged from the closet coming up behind him. Just as he reached for the shower curtain, my hand with the razor blade extended, poised to strike. I could only watch my hand strike him again and again, the shaving razor too dull to sever his jugular in a singular motion. Every time he managed to scream, a stream of crimson shot into the air, ultimately landing on the bathroom floor. Frankie lay motionless. Deep red swatches covered his neck. We were both blood-soaked. Scenes of police coming to take me away in handcuffs ran through my mind, and I tried desperately to cry. Had I just killed my ex-boyfriend in my own apartment? Frankie was relentless, albeit annoying. But did he really deserve to die? It's 2014. I smooth out the folded ceremony pamphlet I'm holding between my lacy black funeral gloves. I don't think I've ever experienced something so sad in my life thus far. 3 white coffins are strategically placed at the front of the room, surrounded by white lilies, carnations, and pink roses. I wipe my eyes, unable to look at the smaller of the 3 for very long. A smiling photo of a former student, Melanie Berlanga, stares back at me from atop the white box. A crowd of mourners draws closer to me, so I move towards the back of the room. I feel a hand cupping the small of my back, offering me silent support. Frankie hands me another tissue, and I take it gratefully. In all my years as a teaching assistant, I had never heard of a student passing away. It was my first year as a second-grade teacher, and I am experiencing something so horrific. I'm not sure I want to go back to the classroom on Monday morning. I briefly read about the accident in the paper. Still, when I saw my student's beautiful face in the middle of the article, I began to sob hysterically. That was 4 days ago now. Melanie's seat still sat empty in my classroom. A counselor was brought in to help the other students process the loss. Still, they seemed unfazed that they would never see her beautiful smiling face again. They are all still so young. My mind drifted back to her much older brother, and that day he had come to pick her up. My eyes scanned the room, looking for him. He stood dressed in an ivory white military uniform, his back to his parents' and sisters' coffins. My heart ached for him in such a profound way. Before I knew it, I was standing next to him, wiping my eyes and expressing my condolences. He stared at me, recognition filtering through his eyes after a few seconds. He nodded, listening to me cry and giving him my cell phone number, begging him to call me if he needed a friend. Hello? I was taken by surprise when he called me a week later. I agreed to go out for drinks with him. I told Frankie I was working late that night. We had a decent time, and I told myself I hadn't done anything wrong because we were simply two acquaintances having a night out. My heart was still so broken for his loss that I had an intense, nurturing desire to comfort him. A week after we had drinks, he invited me to dinner. I knew I should have told him that I did have a boyfriend, a pretty serious one, in fact. But the thought of him having to be rejected crushed something inside me, and so I kept silent. I agreed, and we had a lovely time. The conversation had been light and casual, and I felt comfortable with him. After our third outing, he tried to kiss me, and I faltered. I have a boyfriend, I told him. I was so humiliated as I watched the color drain from his face. He said it was okay, and he had had the wrong impression. A look on his face destroyed me, and I told him I couldn't kiss him while I had a boyfriend, but we had been planning to break up. The lie festered in my gut like food poisoning. Adrian nodded, and we left the date on uncertain terms. Things with Frankie hadn't been bad. They had been completely fine. But now, I felt an obligation to Adrian, who I couldn't bear to cause any more pain that he had already been through. The breakup went horribly, and Frankie begged and begged for a second chance. Things with Adrian were fine. Average. He was smart and motivated and conventionally attractive, but I wouldn't say we had this amazing love story. After about a year of dating, we went on vacation. Our days were spent snorkeling in the Gulf and lounging about on hot sandy beaches. As expected, he proposed on the trip, and I accepted. I couldn't admit to myself that I felt completely out of control of the direction my life was going in, and it was nobody's fault but my own. Adrian wanted children. I was dubious. Being a teacher was something I loved, and I wasn't convinced it required my own brood at home as well. But I refused to cause him any amount of pain, no matter how small, so we began trying. The months turned into a year, and instead of pregnancy, I was gifted my diagnosis. I admit, I spiraled. I was convinced I had been a good person because I was selflessly caring for someone else. Practically all I did was give. So I couldn't understand why such a bad thing was happening to someone like me. Like a coward, I secretly ran back to Frankie, and he was more than happy to join in a sympathetic tryst. And just like that, the tables were turned in our relationship. Catered to me, doing his best not to set me off. He walked on eggshells, doing everything he could to try to please me. My moods, understandably, were erratic and unpredictable. Neither one of us wanted to admit our relationship was anything but healthy. For the bond that brought us together was born out of tragedy. First his, then mine. The slime seemed to percolate inside me, and I felt a growling moan leave my throat. I was terrified Adrian would come home and see what had happened, and I tried everything I could think of to get control over my own body. Do something! I wondered if the slime knew my thoughts, or could hear me telepathically, and I screamed at it inside my brain. Get out of here! But like usual, the slime ignored me and walked me back to the living room. It sat me in the same soggy spot, and I groaned internally. The bloody razor was still held tightly inside my palm. Now I knew. It was simply waiting for Adrian to return home. I was shaking by the time he walked through the door 3 hours later. He blew me a kiss as he scrambled to get dinner started for our promised date night in. He apologized for being so late, and I waited for my body to pounce on him as it did to Frankie. Oh God. Frankie was still lying dead in the bathroom. I almost gave myself an aneurysm trying to get the words out to Adrian, to tell him anything, but no sound emitted from my throat. The slime kept me seated on the couch, waiting for something. I could feel it watching him cook, trying to understand the basics of his actions. It made me stare at the stove, and I could feel it softly vibrate. Adrian placed my plate in front of me atop a TV table and switched on a movie. He didn't seem fazed that I didn't say anything, although I quickly saw him wrinkle his nose when he caught a whiff of me. He politely remained silent and kissed the side of my face. He ate quickly, laughing at the movie between bites of steak and asparagus. He lifted his wine glass to his lips, quenching his thirst with one of the reds from the fridge. He must have forgotten mine, as I saw it perched at the edge of the kitchen counter out of the corner of my eye. Not that I could drink it anyway. My plate sat in front of me untouched. I was still incredibly hungry, but my hand still clung tightly to the razor, refusing to reach for the fork.
Is the steak okay?
Yes. My mouth stumbled over the single word in response. The slime had answered him using my voice again. He nodded, tucking into his food again at a lightning pace. Adrian had always been a sucker for a good piece of steak. After what felt like an hour, his plate was empty in front of him. He groaned, flopping backward onto the couch and unzipping his pants to let his bloated stomach breathe. The movie was ending, but the sequel was just about to start. I nervously waited, wondering what precisely the slime was planning, if anything. I felt my body being forced off the couch and walked towards the front door. My heart started racing as my feet shuffled past the broken mirror. Ah! Frankie's shoe was sticking out from the side of the couch. I looked closer and saw his pile of clothes next to it. From Adrian's spot on the opposite couch, the ottoman had completely obscured it from view. Clumsily, my body got back on my feet and continued to amble into the kitchen. My hand finally released the bloodied razor, placing it deliberately on top of the kitchen counter. I could feel the vibrating sensation throughout my body as my fingers reached up towards the stove and twisted the knob. My heart began to race. This is it. This is how I'm going to die. The apartment building was 27 years old. I knew for as long as I lived here, the ventilation system had never been updated. My eyes scanned the apartment for Adrian, praying he had woken up from his nap by now. But he remained asleep, his arm covering his eyes as he lay on his back on the sofa. The slime seemed to swirl around inside me, and I was overcome by rage. I couldn't let this thing kill Adrian. My eyelids already began to droop, and I could feel a heaviness engulf me. The more I tried to gain control over my own body, the more exhausted I became. The heaviness covered me entirely now, blanketed my body like a weighted Afghan. I started swaying a bit, back and forth, in front of the open oven. My vision began to fade, and I knew it wouldn't be much longer now. I could feel the slime expanding and contracting inside me, and I wondered what would happen to it once I was gone. I dropped to my knees, unable to stand any longer. It just wanted to sleep so badly. The slime began to settle down, and eventually, I didn't feel its movements any longer. All my strength was gone now. But even with my autonomy back, it no longer mattered. I closed my eyes, and my thoughts drifted to Adrian sleeping peacefully on the couch. I knew I couldn't save myself, but I had to try to at least save him. The wine glass. It should be right above me on the counter. Adrian drank his wine, but mine should still be on top of the counter. I had one opportunity, one final chance to try to save him. My strength was almost completely sapped, but with slime outside of my body now, I had to try. Blindly, I tossed my right arm up, over my hand in the general direction of where I had expected the wine glass to be sitting.
Julia.
Tell me your directive, Lieutenant. Lieutenant Berlanga, you have been issued an order. Speak now. Tell me your directive, Lieutenant.
This isn't real. I'm dreaming.
Where do you think you are right now at this moment?
I'm asleep.
Do you know who I am?
Dr. Lauren Rayner.
Correct. And do you know why you are here?
I'm here because I've been ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation.
Correct again. And do you know why you needed the evaluation?
I'm not crazy, Doc.
Shall I remind you that you are under direct order of the United States Air Force and... Excuse me?
Yeah, I remember this. I'm dreaming. Just give me the pills already so I can wake up.
Okay. Instructions are as follows. 1 pill nightly before sleep for 7 days. No social media for 2 weeks following. Understood?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You do realize if you fail to complete this treatment, you will be dishonorably discharged.
Yes.
And you will be stripped of your rank, your GI benefits, your extensive training credits will be erased.
Yes, I understand.
Then, here.
She handed him a manila envelope full of documents.
These will be your new memories.
Adrian opened the folder and saw photographs of his mother and father and younger sister Melanie. Photos of his childhood home, his schools, friends.
Everything's here.
Yes, except...
Julia.
Very good.
It's been 6 weeks since she died, and I'm fine. Honestly.
It doesn't matter. With the outbreak in full swing, all available military personnel will be deployed to provide order and critical aid as needed. You will most likely see the most horrific things imaginable out there. Starting with a clean slate will allow you the best possible headspace to begin your deployment. No doubt you will require several more doses after this epidemic is under control and life returns to normal.
I can handle it.
It's not up to me. The DoD has mandated the doses for all branches as needed.
God forbid I remember my dead fiancé when I'm out there fighting. Is it really that horrible? Can't just wake up and erase all the memory we have about a person. We aren't widgets, we're people. People have a right to their memories.
You can't see the bigger picture, Lieutenant? Oh, honestly, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, well, don't bother.
Shall I remind you that you can still be charged with murder?
Yeah, but I didn't...
There were 2 victims found at the scene, yes?
I had nothing.
One Frank Evans III in addition to Julia Hernandez.
I didn't...
Surely the evidence was clearly stacked against you, Lieutenant. Officers at the scene found the 2 victims covered in blood. And you claimed to be asleep.
I was asleep.
Well, prior to your relationship with Miss Hernandez, she was in a serious relationship with Mr. Evans. In fact, there is concrete evidence that Miss Hernandez and Mr. Evans continued their relationship even though you and Miss Hernandez were engaged. Isn't that correct? You see where I'm going with this, Lieutenant? That's called motive.
I would never.
Well, there's one thing I can't figure out.
What's that?
You thought nothing out of the ordinary coming home from your shift and seeing your fiancée covered in blood?
I didn't know it was blood at the time. She was sick. Sometimes when she got into her mood swings, she did strange things.
So you didn't even ask her what it was?
No.
Okay. Well, that's our session for the day. You have your directive, Lieutenant.
This episode featured the voice talents of Samanthia Nixon, Andrew Quintero, Joe Quickle, Taylor Brock, Julie Mae Panas, Mary G. Snow, and me, Sandy Lisiewski. Story written by Courtney Holloway. Sound design by Christopher Jarvis with the Radio Theater Workshop. Original music by Peter Cleff. You can help support the show by checking us out online. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review.